I'm going to introduce our first keynote speaker. So I'd like to introduce Professor Sandra McNally. I've got a long job title. Director of Education and Skills Programme at the Centre for Economic Performance at the London School of Economics and Professor of Economics at the University of Surrey. Sandra. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. It's a great privilege to be the first speaker of today, which I'm sure will be a very interesting day. I'm going to move a little bit closer to my slides so that I can see them from the lectern. I hope I can see them in a minute anyway. We got them, yes? Nope. Oh, I can't see them. They're there, but I can't see them. Okay, I'll just have to move a little bit. So the main sources for what I'm going to talk about today are the Economy 2030 report. Economy 2030 was an initiative that the Centre for Economic Performance did with the Resolution Foundation. And you can find out all the reports that we had, including quite a number about skills, on the Resolution Foundation website, Economy 2030. And in particular relevance is Learning to Grow, that particular report that we did, and it'll give you more details of what I'm going to say. And the other thing is I've been involved in a British Academy policy programme. It's about the economy, not just about skills, but we had a number of different groups, and I was in the skills group, and a report's going to be published next week, and we're going to draw on some of that, the insights of that report for the discussion today. So investing in a human capital strategy is a central component of any successful growth strategy. And I'm sure I don't have to convince people here of that. But we see that the public investment in education has declined over the last decade, both in real terms as a share of national income. And firms' investment in training has also declined. Despite a growing share of graduates, too many young people and adults still have insufficient levels of skill. If you look at the international data, the UK is not out of line with other industrialized countries in the percentage of people with tertiary level education. But this is, this is by no means, the majority of people do not have tertiary education. There is a very high percentage of the working age population with very low levels of education. And this continues to be a problem even among the younger generation. So part of the Economy 2030 work was identifying a set of key sectors and technologies that are strategic for UK future growth. And obviously, for growth, you need the whole economy to grow. But financial and business services is one of the sectors identified as being a particular strength of the UK economy. And if we're going to build on their strengths, it's important that that sector really thrives. And that's something that's highlighted in this report that I've been telling you about. We also talk about the strategic role of decarbonisation and AI technologies in that report. So the question is, what is skill demand and supply, and how does supply need to change in response to the demand in the sector? If you look at the employment share, there has been, financial and business services accounts for quite a big share of employment in the UK workforce. That's 10%. If you look at the average weekly earnings of people in the strategic sectors, and you compare that to the rest of the economy, you can see that strategic sectors are better places to work than the rest of the economy for people at all levels of education, even at quite low levels of education. So that's quite important, because if the sector were to grow, it would help people of lower levels of education too, not just people from high levels of education. The other thing to notice is obviously there's a premium to high education. The more education you have, the higher the premium you have. But that trajectory is actually stronger in the strategic sectors compared to the rest of the economy. And you can show that in lots of different ways, and we do that in the report. I'm not going to do that here. That really the returns to education are high despite having a lot of graduates, which suggests that demand exceeds supply. If you look at the sector as well, it's very graduate heavy, or this is strategic sectors as a whole, much more so than the rest of the economy. So these sectors need a lot of people who are very highly educated. If you look at the different sectors, you can see that financial and business services are about 58% of the workers in the sector have higher education, a degree, as their highest level of education. So if you want the sector to grow, you need the higher education sector to be thriving as well, and you need to have more people who have higher education, not fewer. But if you also look at the level below that, sub-degree levels, and that's in the English nomenclature, that's level 4, level 5 qualifications. There seems to be, by some metrics anyway, a potential deficit there. This is mapping on the occupational requirements of strategic sectors to the education levels within those sectors and looking at the gap. And what this is based on looking at ONET, which is actually a US measure. So there may be some difficulties of translation to the English context, but what it suggests is that a problem potentially is that there are not so many people with sub-degree qualifications and too many who stop at basically upper secondary education, which is A-levels or equivalent. And that suggests that, that's a particular issue. Moving to skills. I mean, I've talked about education, but what about skills? The sorts of skills in the economy at large, and you can look at this in lots of different ways, but the sorts of skills that are in use and in demand are things like abstract, analytical, cognitive skills, and social skills, as in soft skills, communication, teamwork, those sorts of things. And lots of different types of analysis show that these skills are in higher use over time, reflecting the shares of employment going into different occupations over time, and also that the returns to those skills are increasing as well, in contrast to routine and manual skills that where the usage and the demand and the wage premium is declining. When you look at job adverts, and this is another section of the Learning to Grow report, and you look at the kinds of share, what's actually required in vacancies and do an analysis of the skills that are required in vacancies, you see some things in common between the different strategic sectors. You see things like social skills, critical thinking, initiative and leadership, all being high growth across the three strategic sectors. If you look at specific skills, you will see more differences across the strategic sectors. So within financial and business services, changes are required in managerial skills such as project management, business management, and business strategy, and have grown in importance alongside more people-orientated skills such as client support. So what do we do about all of this? Well, improving education and training pathways. As I hope I've put across, financial and business services need a high share of people educated to tertiary level, undergraduate degree level, just to stand still, never mind grow. National issues are the level of investment at all stages of education, including the financial sustainability of higher education institutes. So I'm sure people here will be all aware of, we see in a newspaper every day, of universities running into trouble with redundancies. And this is, from my own institution last year, an issue for lots and lots of universities in the UK. And it really is a problem. So I do think that this it doesn't just affect universities, but it affects people who are beneficiaries of universities as well. So something to be aware of and engage with, I hope. The other issue, important issue, is the gap between upper secondary and degree qualifications for young people. There needs to be more sub-degree provision, more apprenticeships for young people to really facilitate, especially the group of people who don't go to higher education, to universities to do degrees, who perhaps don't want to or perhaps can't. There needs to be other things available, as there are in other countries, and more of that in the UK, because in institutions, we don't only work with people who are degrees. You rely on everybody, and everybody needs to have skills and education to be able to perform well in teams. As we work in teams, we don't just work as individuals. So the question is, could there be a bigger role for sub-degree provision within the business of financial services? If so, the sector itself needs to develop a strategy for this, needs to identify where this progression could be built better into the system itself. No one's going to do that for you from the centre, and it really needs to come from the sector. It needs to be built up, bottom up, and then a request for the resources. But really, to make this work, you really have to understand the sector itself, and only you can do that. How do you actually do that in a real and a practical way within the sector? The other thing is, something, again, apprenticeships in England are very much a bottom-up approach. Even creating an apprenticeship standard is something that's bottom-up. But you need to ensure that apprenticeships are kept up to date and contain sufficient depth of transferable skills useful to the whole sector, not just individual businesses or a group of employers. And the quality of on-the-job training and mentorship also needs to be high. There is evidence linking apprenticeships to innovation in other countries because that's where they have the data. But really, to make that happen, you have to make sure that the apprenticeships are not just at the minimum absolutely required, but that are really built and strengthened and improved. The next slide is really drawing from the British Academy report, which contains a lot, and I'm only going to draw on a few insights that I feel is relevant to the discussion today. We talk about the demand for individual types of skills, and that's fine, but of course employers recruit on bundles of skills, not just individual skills, and there are actually returns to those bundles of skills, not just to people's technical knowledge or management knowledge. You sort of need to have a whole range of skills. And they are not necessarily fully transferable across contexts. So no matter how well trained your inflow of people is, whether they're from apprenticeships or whether they're from straight from the education system, the need to train is ongoing. And much of that is stuff that is not actually financed or subsidized by the government. And then some skills, like soft skills, can be hard to credentialize as well. They're important, but how do you actually train people in them, and how do people get a sort of credential that says they have them, and those things are quite difficult. We can talk about the need for narrowly defined specific skills, but we need to bear in mind that these things shift over time and sometimes very quickly. So the demand for cybersecurity and AI skills are obviously increased very much now, but telemarketing has disappeared. So I suppose that there has to be an awareness that whatever you do is not just a one-off thing. You have to kind of keep on doing that, particularly with technical skills. Need to have strategies in place that people will have this for their working life, not just for the initial thing. Another insight from the report is that giving uncertainty on things like the future application of AI and how extensive that's going to be, businesses need to become better at skills planning, and enhancing management skills is likely critical for that. And then another insight is that when thinking about investing in people, it shouldn't be thought of as something separate from investing in other types of technologies or innovation. In a way, those two things need to be considered hand in hand. And ideally, you would like to encourage types of innovation that are complementary to increasing labour productivity and augmenting existing skills. Okay, final slide on lifelong learning. Well, another national issue is how do we get different types of tertiary education on a more level playing field, and the lifelong learning entitlement is a mechanism for doing that, and hopefully that will be fully implemented, which will mean that people's decisions won't be interfered with because of better funding for degrees relative to sub-degree qualifications, and it's right that should be implemented. But it doesn't cover everything, that just covers tertiary education. There is an argument for public support to individuals for education and training that falls outside of that, for lower levels of education, for shorter courses, and there is good evidence of high returns to training, especially for some groups. Mothers returning to work is an example of a group of people who really, empirical evidence of high returns for that group, and perhaps extending beyond just training to any other types of initiative you can try and do to help that group of the population. Now, because because businesses, there is an externality. By that I mean that the investment and training that you do as a business doesn't just benefit you, but it benefits other businesses, it benefits the economy. And people might not invest so much in that because they're worried about poached by others. So it's important that that's recognised and that the government subsidises businesses, that there's a good argument for subsidising business for skills that falls outside the things like the lifelong learning entitlement and things like the apprenticeship levy. Human capital tax credits would be one mechanism for that, which is like R&D tax credits. Final point, and it's important that there should be collaboration between stakeholders to improve skills, for example, at a regional level, and the evolution, for example, of local skills improvement plans. And again, that really has to happen with you. It's for you to decide what that should look like and how to improve that. I'll finish there.